Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome everyone to Phonetics. This is our new course in this semester, and our today's topic is relationship between phonetics and phonology. Okay, let's get into the topic by introduction first. Throughout the history of linguistics, one of the intractable problems has been to define the proper relationship between phonology and phonetics. With regard to this issue, there are at least three clear possible perspectives. Out of those three perspectives, the first one is an abstract view of phonology. So there is, in this first point of view, there is no interface between phonetics and phonology with the fully autonomous nature of them. This can be characterized as an abstract view of phonology because somewhat concrete phonetic properties are not employed to characterize abstract phonological components. According to the abstract view, phonological and phonetic representations are independent from each other, which induces arbitrary mapping between them. This can cause some problems in characterizing phonological features proposed by Lombardi in 1991. The features that she employed in her study are so abstract that they cannot be properly defined, which results in arbitrary features. The second perspective is integrated theory. According to this theory, phonology and phonetics are unified, whereby phonetics and phonology are parallel with direct relations between them. The basic idea of this position is that the properties of phonology and phonetics should be equally interpreted in a unified, integrated single module rather than two separate modules, phonological and phonetic modules means. In the case of the integrated theory, phonetic details are incorporated in phonological representations. Accordingly, the number values that are measured and computed are present in phonological analysis. This is in fact different from our mental process because we do not store those numbers in our memories. In other words, this unified view fails to explain why speech sounds are perceived categorically rather than continuously. The last view, the modular theory, the third view, is somewhat in the middle of the above two radical positions. That is, there is a separation between phonology and phonetics. However, they are strongly connected with each other. In fact, this view is well represented by laboratory phonology since it emphasizes the interaction or interface of phonetics and phonology. In favor of modular theory, a principle can be proposed about phonology-phonetics interface. For example, if we have two phonological representations A and B, and A is more marked than B, then it should not be the case that the phonetic expression of B is more marked than the phonetic expression of A. Alright, after the introduction of the area of our today's lecture, so let's get into the main discussion of our today's topic, the relationship between phonetics and phonology. The relationship between phonetics and phonology has long been debated because both phonetics and phonology share a common interest in the sounds of all human languages, and because phonetics and phonology are often differentiated in terms of concrete phonetic scales versus abstract phonological features. One conception of the most crucial difference of features between phonology and phonetics is found in the values of phonological and phonetic features. It's generally assumed that in phonology the values of features are unary or binary, whereas phonetic features are typically expressed as more than two values or even continuous. With regard to the relationship between phonetics and phonology, there have been largely three different positions. These are: number one, a clear separation with an arbitrary mapping relation between them. That is, phonetics is not the same as phonology, or they are not the same. Two, parallels with direct relations between them. That means phonetics and phonology, they go parallel with some direct relationship between them. And number three, separation with a principled connection between them. Alright, so first one, in the abstract view of phonology. One a priori possibility would be a clear separation between the two categories with arbitrary laws of interface between them. This would be a fully abstract view in the sense that under this view only phonology is conceived as properly part of grammar due to its formal, cognitive, and abstract nature. Conversely, phonetics fails to be assigned as part of the grammar in this view. Given the distinct properties between phonology and phonetics under this view, there is an arbitrary mapping from phonology to phonetics. The basic assumption is that phonetic components vary from one language to another, and that phonology and phonetics are regarded as entirely autonomous is one of particular importance in this radical abstract view. Okay, now let's discuss the second perspective, the unified model of phonetics and phonology in detail. According to this view, phonology and phonetics are integrated into a single unit which is all phonetic. In this unified account, phonological components should be executed in quantitative phonetic values, which results from the idea that the area of phonology is equal to that of phonetics. Phonology is equal to phonetics. In this model, phonetic and phonological phenomena are best handled as a uniform component on the assumption that they are not discrete. Therefore, contrastive properties coexist, non-contrastive ones within the model. Given that under this view there is no difference between phonology and phonetics, no mapping is required between the two. This is consistent with Fleming's view that many similarities between phonetics and phonology should be explained by adopting a unified framework. So here we have a quotation from Fleming, in which he says, but it should be noted that the very existence of such uncertainty about the hypothesized dividing line between phonetics and phonology lends credence to the idea that the line does not exist. And at another place, it says that there are many cases in which phonetic and phonological phenomena closely parallel each other. I have argued that the existence of these parallels is best analyzed as resulting from the phenomena having the same motivating constraints. And I have outlined a unified framework for phonetics and phonology that allows for such an analysis. However, it's not clear whether phonological and phonetic properties are even considered the same or not within this unified framework. One possible interpretation for Fleming's claim would be that the division between phonetics and phonology should be ignored despite the presumption that um, they are different from each other in nature. And the other would be that he assumes both phonetic and phonological properties are essentially the same. But obviously, phonological features should be differentiated from phonetic features. In contrast to the first radical position that phonetics and phonology are apparently separated, this model has been developed in a different way, coming to another radical attitude. Means that phonetics and phonology are closely integrated in a single grammar, not simply interfaced as advocated in Ohala. Ohala's view is that phonology should not be conceived as an autonomous discipline, but it should encompass as much physical phonetics as necessary to give an explanation of human language. The bottom line of their position is the criticism that while phonetics representations are by their nature complicated due to the interaction of physical and perceptual systems, phonological representations are stated more simply without specifying all the characteristics of phonetic properties. Is their main idea that the properties of phonology and phonetics are equally interpreted in a unified single module instead of two distinct modules, phonological and phonetic modules. The basic idea of the unified model is that there is no difference in representations between phonetics and phonology. It's not the case that phonological representations are discrete as opposed to continuous phonetic representations. Both representations are instead continuous. However, constraints sometimes force us to pick out a set of categories in preference, which induces a discrete state. The last obvious view of this third perspective would be that phonetics and phonology are distinct from each other, but that there is also a significant interaction between them. Within this position, there is a constrained mapping, possibly parametric uh, mapping, between phonology and phonetics, which implies phonological elements are universally related to phonetic ones to some extent. An attitude similar to this approach can be found in the sound pattern of English, whereby phonological and phonetic representations are related by rules. The point is not simply that phonetics and phonology constitute separate levels, an abstract underlying representation versus a concrete surface representation. Rather, it is critically important that the general properties of phonological representations represent the best compromise between concrete phonetic transcription and abstract representation. Here we see here a quotation from Chomsky and Hale in 1968. They express this view in the following quotation. I read it for you, but I'm very much sure you can read it by yourself as well. But anyway, we therefore can represent lexical items neither in phonetic transcription nor in an arbitrary notation totally unrelated to the elements of the phonetic transcription. What is needed is a representation that falls between these two extremes. We specifically allow the rules of grammar. Such rules are unnecessary in cases where the lexical representations can be accepted as the phonetic representation. In general, the more abstract the lexical representation, the greater will be the number and complexity of the phonological rules required to map it into a phonetic transcription. We therefore postulate abstract lexical entries only where this cost is more than compensated for by greater simplification of the entire system. Furthermore, a strong interaction between phonetics and phonology is advocated by laboratory phonology. The most persuasive appeals to laboratory phonology may be the fact that it has attempted to discover the relation of phonetics to phonology more carefully, which in turn compromises the above two radical views for the most part. The two radical which claim that phonetics and phonology are modified, and one says that they are separate. In much of the laboratory work, the idea is apparent that there is a dichotomy between phonetics and phonology, and thus phonological and phonetic representations are distinct from each other, in that the former treats abstract formal units while the later treats gradient phenomena. In other words, phonetics and phonology are dependent each other, but the dividing line between phonology and phonetics is not eliminated. It's also important to note that within most of the laboratory phonology, phonetics is regarded as an integral part of the grammar rather than outside of it, which makes it possible, even desirable, for phonetic measurement to provide evidence about formal representations and rules. Alright, now this is just a recap of the integrated view and modular view. A major landmark in the emergence of laboratory phonology is Pierre Humbert's proposal of a phonological representation for English intonation and a proposal for phonetic rules that implement phonetic feature values. In terms of a separation between phonology and phonetics, Pierre Humbert first develops an abstract representation for English intonation at a phonological level with an emphasis on patterns rather than quantitative values. Thus, the phonological characterization of English intonation is analyzed as an association of discrete tone units. For example, uh, to the text through a metrical grid. Is then the continuous FO contours uh, that corresponds to the phonetic representation. In addition, the contour is generated by a set of rules, for example, local context sensitive rules and tone spreading, which are, as discussed by Keating, interpreted as phonetic rules rather than phonological rules due to the nature of their quantitative evaluation. It remains now for us to see how phonology can share phonetics in Pierre Humbert's analysis. It should be noted that Pierre Humbert's proposal, the major role of phonetic rules is to complete phonological representations with concrete phonetic values. Phonetic is often placed a priori outside of grammar, which makes phonology necessarily autonomous. Contrary to this traditional view, Pierre Humbert maintains that the phonetic representation, the output of the phonetic rules, is better characterized as linguistic, means mental, than as physical. As a consequence, the phonetically relevant component is assigned as part of the grammar in addition to the phonology. All right, let's conclude our talk today. In an attempt to define how phonetics is related to phonology, laboratory phonology has been recently developed with a somewhat neutral attitude. In laboratory phonology, it's mainly assumed that there is an apparent division between phonology and phonetics, but they are at the same time strongly connected to each other. The validity of this phonology phonetics interface is enhanced by the fact that there is no flip of tones between phonology and phonetics. This, of course, implies that the nature of phonological features is circumscribed by phonetic facts. That is, phonological features are not arbitrarily determined, they instead should reflect what the phonetic fact is. Uh, Alright, thank you very much. This is your assignment. You will write a comprehensive note on the relationship between phonetics and phonology. Although I have just presented just a few aspects of the relationship between phonology and phonetics, and you will do your research and present a good unique assignment. And one more thing, I expect that you may have heard some of new terminologies, new terms in today's lecture, and this is also a good opportunity for you to search, to get experience of research. I mean, just use those new terms, new words as keywords, and Google them, and increase your knowledge around this topic. Thank you very much, and see you in next lecture very soon, inshallah. Thank you.